Alrighty, folks, welcome to a live conversation with Spags Unfiltered. This is his first time on Living Free in Tennessee, so I know you guys are going to love it. And when he asked me, hey, let's do a show, I was like, I think that's a great idea. This dude is all about freedom and community and preparedness, and he knows a thing or two about running events. So we're going to talk about whatever you all want to talk about. If you have a question, put your question in all caps so that I can star it and ask it later. And if you're just hopping on the live stream, be sure to let everybody know in our network that we're live. I did give a reminder earlier, but I want to make sure folks are here live for this discussion who want to be, because there is a lot we can learn from Spags. So, hey, dude, welcome to the show. How's it going today? You are on mute.
Thanks for having me. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Long-time listener, first-time caller. All right. So who's Spags and how did you end up launching this whole Spags Unfiltered thing? I'm like purposefully not saying your name because I don't know if you want me to. So
No, Spags is fine.
Okay.
It's shortened from my last name. I got that while I was in the Army.
Yes.
The drill sergeants couldn't say my name, so I got everything from SpaghettiOs to Private Star Spangled Banner, and we just stuck with Spags.
Yeah, my mom loves to say your full last name.
Does
She's
she?
like, oh, he's coming. And she'll like say your name. She loves it.
Yeah, that's where the name comes from. Spags Unfiltered. I never thought I would do it. I never thought I'd have a YouTube or a personality online. I honestly thought that I was going to be relegated just to putting on preparedness shows in Kansas, where I'm from.
Yeah.
And then after doing a couple of interviews with Billy back in the day, he convinced me to finally pull the trigger. And as I started to decide to do it, that's when Tag from Life Done Free reached out and was like, dude, you need to do it. So I'm like, I guess I'm doing this. And so I did.
I'm doing it.
Yep.
And then you got all up in our faces about the Constitution and stuff, as I recall.
I'm up in your face about a lot of things on my channel. Buyer beware. I'm I guess a non-patriot in that way. I'm a non-pat. I don't subscribe to any one, line or party or platform. I'm very anti-political, actually. But I definitely believe in absolute and ultimate freedom, and that liberty and freedom are individual things, not group or collective things. And therefore you have no say in the matter.
Yep. You know, what's funny is that's why you're friends with Life Done Free.
Yes.
He's all about freedom. I was talking to him because I'm always talking to him about like off-grid stuff and homesteading stuff. And he's like, honestly, Nicole, where I shine is on the freedom side of things.
Yes.
It's like, that's my passion. I'm like, that's funny because that's how I ended up here. I kind of came through a freedom door. So he and I get along there as well. Anyway, I brought you on today to talk about the Midwest Preparedness Project, but let's start with freedom.
Sure.
How do you define freedom? How do you build freedom in your life?
I define freedom as absolutely divorcing the state as much as humanly possible. Just going to get it right out there in the open. I am an anarchist.
I am an anarchist. Okay.
Yes. Not the kind that run around in Seattle with masks on their face, burning trash cans, thinking they're
those aren't anarchists, in my opinion.
No, those are chaos agents. Those are Bolsheviks, and I don't like them.
Yeah.
Anarchist meaning I don't believe in central rulership. I bow to no earthly king. And that means to me that you and the rest of the country do not have the right to vote for a king that gets to tell me what to do. If I don't like what a certain politician says, or any of them, or a judge, I just don't listen to it. And I do what I want to do. And I do it in a way where I'm not going to impede on you in doing so. And that's the magic, right? The magic is I can do what I want as long as I don't prevent you from doing what you want. And if we all just did that, we'd be fine.
Yeah. That second part's hard for people.
It is.
As long as I don't prevent you from doing what you want, that's the part that gets us in trouble, don't you think?
It is. Because everybody believes their own brand of bullshit, including me. I believe my own brand of bullshit. We all do.
Yeah.
And it becomes very hard to have a conversation with people when they only view things from their one little, unique perspective. And all of our perspectives are necessary. They're all built on our own life experiences. They're all legitimate. But just because I've had a bad experience doing X 15 different times doesn't mean I should be able to prevent you from doing X. And it doesn't mean I can vote for someone to make sure you can't do X.
Right. Literally ecstasy, right?
Music festivals.
Woo!
Rock Fest
I
back
have
in
to be
the
careful my laughter.
2000 teens, man. That was my jam. That was my Rumspringa.
Your Rumspringa, that's
Yep.
right.
None of my kids, and I had no guns, so whatever I did, I did.
You did. I mean, we've all been on this journey called life.
Yep.
And we've all done things. And I think that's really interesting when we get to the point where we're like, yes, freedom for me, but not for thee.
Right.
Because literally what you're trying to keep people from doing are stuff that you did that you learned from. And the only way you learned from it was how?
Failing and figuring it out. I didn't learn it because someone taught it to me, you know?
Right. I mean, in my older years, I'm learning that when a neighbor who's lived in the area for 50 years tells me, you know, if you do that to your land, it's going to be a cluster. Usually they're right for a reason because they've been around here 15 years. And so I've started listening to people sometimes, but I'm pretty stubborn. So, you know, I will try things and learn things the hard way most of the time. It's just
Right.
what I do.
Yes.
But I was just
enjoy failing. I really do. Like with my
Yeah.
gardening I'm still new to. I've only been gardening I was a prepper forever. Now I'm a freesteader. So I do the whole homesteading things also, but I'm learning, right? I've only been gardening for 6 years.
Yeah.
And I know I can go on Google and I know I can pick up a phone and call people in my local groups. But sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just try something just to see if it'll work. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I've learned.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I was on with somebody yesterday with John Pugliano, and we started talking about failure. And the thing about failure is you can fail for two reasons. One reason you fail is you tried your hardest, something went wrong and it didn't work.
Right.
And when you do that, you know what went wrong. And you may try something else and something else goes wrong, but you know the one, you're like, well, that didn't work. Why didn't that work? Probably didn't work because of this. Okay, I'll try that. Or you can fail because you didn't try.
Correct. And most people fail for the second reason.
Most people fail because they don't try. And so I was just saying, you know, you got to put your all into it or decide you're not doing that thing.
Right.
And that is a lesson they don't teach us growing up. Right.
Right. Because everything is so regimented. You know, we have the Prussian style of public education in this system, which is designed to pass the most amount of people with the least amount of resistance. And so the way for them not to have resistance is to not let you come up with your own brain algorithms. You don't have to figure things out. It's all just, it's in a book, memorize it, regurgitate it on command. You're good to go. Go pull a lever, pay your taxes, and be a good little citizen, you know?
Yeah. Meanwhile, if you go to the grocery store and there's nothing on the shelf, you don't know what to do.
Right.
Yeah. And that, you know, that's where we get weird statements like, I don't know why you would butcher cows on your property. You just go to the store where you don't have to do that to the poor animal and get your steaks there.
Right.
And we're all sitting there going, do you like literally not know where your meat comes from at the store? Like literally not? Yeah.
Oh. See, and yeah, and like Rain Country mentioned earlier. By the way, hi Rain Country. She mentioned how some people are like, there ought to be a law, everyone should have a garden. And she was like, no, wrong. You should just do it because it's the right. It's the same thing. I believe every man, at least, and women too, but certainly the men should go out and have to kill an animal at least once in their life. But I would never make a law saying you'd have to, right?
Yeah. And it's, you know, I know feeling that way. So when we make laws about morality, which it gets very, very slippery slope for, you know, it seems like an obvious thing. And I was having this conversation. This is not a popular opinion. I was having this conversation with Jack Spirko the other day, and he went like way off the cliff with it. And I was like, that's not where I was going, but okay, you just went there. But Tennessee just passed a law outlawing drag shows in places where children can see them. And the motivation for that was that, I don't know if this actually happened in our state or it happened somewhere else. Drag shows with people dressed in thongs doing sexually explicit things were happening at schools.
Yes.
So the reaction was to make a law. But what that basically does is a community theater doing Mrs. Doubtfire.
Right.
That's now illegal for kids to go to.
Right. And
and so it's like, you know, I wouldn't have done that. And they're like, well, his first question is, well, then would you let kids go into a strip club? And I'm like, well, okay. If kids are going into a strip club with their parents, the problem isn't that there should be a law to keep them out of strip clubs.
Right.
The actual problem is their parents are bringing them there. And then I can think of a scenario where mom is a stripper, single mom. It's the only way she can make money. Babysitter bogues on her. She brings her child to the strip club and they're helping take care of the child in the back. Is that the best scenario for that kid at that point? I don't know, but it's better than them being left alone at home, probably. So there's like all of these what ifs that come up when we try to make it just a single moral judgment. And you know, I said that I lost listeners that day, whatever. But it's, you know, it's kind of a weird thing. And that's where it becomes very hard, because I also remember growing up, my grandfather taking me into the bar.
Right.
Which is a thing you cannot do now, because drinking and 21 years old. I didn't drink alcohol. I had a soda while he had a drink with his buddies. And did that teach me that alcohol was cool? Probably. And do some people not agree with that message? Fine. Am I an alcoholic today because of that? No.
Right. And it's, what's the difference between your dad taking you to the bar while you have a soda and then going to Applebee's and the same thing happens over a steak?
There is food at Applebee's. That is the difference.
There's a bowl of communal peanuts at the bar.
Yeah.
What's a little hepatitis to go along with your beer?
Yeah, I mean, fine. Perfect. So, you know, and that's where I think it gets hard for us, and where I challenge myself, and I've had to like really learn what's not any of my business. Like, I don't approve of how somebody's raising their children. Do I call CPS? No, I don't.
No. And here's the issue with the whole law thing, you know, and people, I don't think people consider this, is when you make an appeal to authority, when you appeal to the law, you've just created infrastructure that will someday be used against you. And just because today you agree with what the law says doesn't mean that 2 administrations from now, 1 administration from now, hell, the same administration is going to be turned around and used in a way you don't anticipate. And when it's the whole same argument with drugs, do we make drugs legal? I say no. I say you decriminalize drugs, right? That way it's not legal or illegal. There's no law either way, and let the cards fall where they may. And people don't like that. And they don't like it because they have to give up control. But the same law that will be used against your enemies will be used against you. And I think we're seeing that all over the damn place. And the right wing has to get off their ass about this in particular, because the right wing throughout the 80s controlled that narrative. They had the censorship. They were the ones that kept all this stuff in the corner. They kept it all in the dark. And we can debate whether it belonged there or not. But now those exact same rules and those exact same laws and that same precedent is now being used on Bookface and TwitterPated and Instaban and all these places who now censor the right. And they don't like it. But when they had the power, they sure as hell did it too.
They do. That the problem is the power. That's where I came to. I worked in public policy for 14 years. I love the people who are still willing to waste their time trying to push back on the government. I think that they could actually make more progress somewhere else, but they don't.
No.
Again, their decision. And sometimes they beat back some bad policies, and good on them. The problem is the system is built to get ever bigger and take more and more control.
Right. Great. We got a 12-month reprieve, but what difference does that make?
Yeah.
Or you can be an anarchist and be like, I don't really care what politicians scribble randomly on paper. I'm going to live my life how I choose before my God and in front of my family and friends, and only I can answer for that.
Yeah. So anyway, this is why we love Spags, guys. You can see, and my listeners love it when I talk about freedom and get really riled up about freedom, and I hardly ever do it.
Well, today is going to be their day.
Today's the day, yeah, right. And it's because hard questions come up. I actually had somebody on a week ago who is passionate about helping people get to the core underlying problem when they're sick, and fixing that rather than just mask the symptoms. So like, if you have hives, what's causing the hives? Is it your immune system is down? Are you exposed to something you need to not be exposed to? If we have to use Western medicine, we will, but why are they there? And can we totally change it? And because he's passionate about helping people, he kind of went off on this thing about, because it's a direct primary care thing. So subscription medicine, basically. You pay a monthly fee, you get to see him whenever you need to. He promises to get you in same day, even though sometimes that means he works weird long days because everybody's sick on the same day, right?
Right.
He'll do house calls. Like, this is awesome. And he was like, and the emergency medical should just be free for everybody and paid by our taxes, property taxes, like school is. And he goes off on this whole thing. And I haven't actually gotten an email about this one yet, because what I don't like to do is have a big fundamental argument with somebody who's on my show,
Right.
talking about an alternative to medicine that's a really good solution, which is you don't use insurance, you pay money to the doctor to support you, and that's great. Because he's so passionate about helping people, and because the structure that he knows for paying for things in society for people who may or may not be able to afford it is government and taxation, his solution was government and taxation.
Right.
Now I want to have a conversation about how can we pay for emergency services to people without the government? Like, what if we didn't have to use the system?
Right. It's called a co-op. It existed long before insurance. It existed long before the state was involved. The only problem with co-ops today is now we have mega cities with 1 million people in it. We weren't designed to live that way. And the minute you conglomerate so many people in a very small amount, a finite geographical location, your resource to person ratio just got screwed, right? And that's why government is so needed by these people, because they don't see any other way, because they're already fighting this massive uphill battle.
Yeah.
And there is no easy answer. There's no perfect answer. There's no one size fits all answer. But what I can definitively say is, regardless of what brand of political bullshit you subscribe to, there is no political answer. There is none.
Right.
There's none. Because the kind of people who gravitate towards the type of jobs who are going to figure that out aren't the kind of people you want there to begin with.
Absolutely. And co-ops are an option. I mean, we vilify HOAs a lot, right? In our network, because they tell you what color you can paint your house and what you can plant in your yard. On the other hand, if you opt into a community that has certain rules and regulations, and because that's what you want, that's not necessarily all bad. And that is another way that could happen, is I'm moving to this community and here are the emergency services that come with it. In exchange for that, I give, $500 a month or whatever it is. So
the difference is voluntary exchange. With government and taxation, there's no voluntary exchange. You just happen to have been unlucky enough to have been, by pure chance, born into a geographical location without any choice. And you're just finding yourself under the rules of some dude with powdered wigs from 1776. That's not fair. But if you decide to join a HOA or a co-op or whatever, that's your choice. That's a voluntary exchange, which is the ultimate basis to anarchism, is everything has to be voluntary.
And then you look at the Amish, who somehow managed to, from the community, pay for medical needs of their members. But you know what else happens there? Is some people choose not to be treated for things they know will be expensive and an undue burden on their community. And that's why when we talk about healthcare, it's really hard for people to wrap their heads around it, because life is valuable. And we love our family.
Yes.
And when somebody in our family has something that is crazy expensive to deal with and it's gonna kill them, all we want is for them not to die.
Sure.
That's all we want. And that's normal.
It is normal. And it's the classic, the butting of heads between logic and emotion, right?
Yeah.
And none of us can actually speak to what we would do until we were, faced with that kind of a situation. It's very easy to have a hardline position one way or the other.
Yeah.
All I can say is that I hope that when I get put in those positions, that I will stay true to my beliefs, and that I will pick the choice that's the best for others around me as well as myself. And that's the best we can do.
Yeah. And as we have more quote unquote breakthroughs in modern medicine, we can keep people alive through crazier things. Like, part of why this question wasn't such a big question 100 years ago is people just died.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now we can breathe for them and all this other crazy stuff.
Right. We artificially prolong life and then expect it to be at the same quality as a non-artificially prolonged life. And again, I'm not preaching about it, because I've never had to be in that position. I can't imagine what it would be like We all remember what it was like some years ago when the whole Terry Schiavo court case was thrust into the national
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
perspective, and everybody had an opinion. Everybody had an opinion, but it seemed like everyone's opinion was completely devoid of logic or empathy. It was just, well, I've got this position because, well, X, Y, and Z. And I don't think it works that way.
No. And I think that is the challenge with all of the medical freedom stuff is if we're going to let people make their own choices, sometimes that choice is to be pulled off life support.
Right. And you have to be, if you're going to have a consequence and choice-based life, you have to accept both. You can't scream for freedom and then be unwilling to accept the consequences of your own decisions. If you decide for 50 years that all you're going to do is eat McDonald's and smoke cigarettes, why should the rest of us pay for the aftermath of that? That was your choice. Those were your choices. And I don't want to hear in 2023 that the media made me do it or the devil made me do it or the Republicans or the Democrats. No, you chose that, man. This is all out in the open. We all know bad decision making.
Yeah.
I still drink liquor. I gave up cigarettes years ago, but I still love my bourbon. I love my Tennessee whiskeys and bourbons, and I probably aren't going to give that up anytime soon. So
hey, I know what he wants as a speaker gift. Yeah, right. Exactly. And that's the funny part. It's very easy to logically know I shouldn't put the thing in my body or I should exercise every day or any of those things. Doing those habits are hard.
Yeah. Freedom is hard. Freedom is hard and freedom is dangerous. And that's why people love government, because people don't like, at least in the modern world, hard and dangerous. They like soft, easy, and convenient.
Yeah. And they want somebody else to handle their problem.
Yes. It's the age-old thing. If I don't have to see where my shit goes, I just want to be able to push a button and it goes away.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that reality very well could soon be coming to an end.
Yes, it could. I know exactly where my shit goes.
Yeah, I have a septic system. I'm not on city water.
Yeah, it's like I gotta get that pumped every so often. And
yep.
And if it fails, I have composting outhouses and I'll have to run outside every time, but that's okay. Composting outhouses are like the best thing to put on your homestead, by the way. Go ahead.
How many people would be willing to do that? How many people are willing to put composting outhouses on there and not deal with the convenience of modern plumbing?
Yeah, most people aren't. I think, it's been very good for me to live on a homestead because I've been forced to learn how to do things for myself, like make the water system work. And now that Tactical Redneck's my partner in this property, and now he makes the water system work. But when he makes it work, I'm like, but why? Because I need to know in case you're sick that day. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with the waste system and all of those things. And so to me, it's not out of scope.
Right.
But I would think that 15 years ago, me would not have been super copacetic with the bucket system of composting poo.
And that might not be the system other people choose either. But I think you hit on a key point there. It's when you were forced to do this. It's when you decided to homestead.
Yeah.
This is why the Bolsheviks on the left hate freedom and why they hate the free market, because unless you have ownership of something, you tend not to value it as much.
Yeah.
My parents did not buy my first bicycle. I had to save my own money that I made from doing chores at the age of 7 to buy my own bicycle. But you know what? I had that bicycle till I was 13. I took care of it. And when a tire went flat, I saved my money and I took it to the shop to get the flat fixed.
Yeah.
Spoke got broken. I had to save my money. And I had to learn early how to value things because I owned it. And I think that's why there's such an incessant push from the Bolsheviks on the left to ensure that there's no property ownership and that there's no private property and everything is centralized, because as long as they have you hooked on that worm of convenience and that marshmallow of comfortability, it's because you don't own anything. You don't know any better. You don't have to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. So, another way we could fund things that's completely outside of the scope of how our society works now is if we transitioned into a gifting society.
Yes. Agreed. Kind of a barter and exchange versus
Yeah.
using currency. Absolutely.
Well, and giving people what they need if it's in your power to give it. If that was the cultural norm, that would take a major shift, though.
It would take a huge shift, and we're starting to see it already. In the preparedness realm specifically, and the homesteading realm specifically, we're already starting to see the bartering taking over again.
Yeah.
And this has been going on for a while. And early on, probably 2008, when the prepping movement really hit hard again, when Mr. Obama was elected and everyone freaked out. Everyone started buying silver, gold, and everybody was trading in gold and silver, and that was great. It got the gears going, right? But now we're seeing people trading and bartering services, trading and bartering things at shows, trading and bartering things. For example, I don't know very much about electricity. So if I need something electrically done, I'm going to barter with my neighbor who's an electrician. And as he's doing stuff, I'm watching him and I'm trying to learn. But in exchange, I give him eggs and some food from my garden. Boom, no money exchanges hands. And we're starting to see that become normal in a lot of our circles.
Yeah, and that does become normal in a lot of circles. Here's somebody who's having trouble here with what we're talking about. Not, by the way, I don't mean this in a negative way, but that sounds good on paper. But what about the mentally ill who make arrangements with some POS to murder them? If the victim were my family, well, use your imagination. So I think the question is, if somebody in my family is mentally ill and hires somebody to kill them, how is that different than suicide?
Are we talking about like physician-assisted suicide?
I don't know.
I don't understand the parameters of the question.
Yeah, I don't understand either. Exactly. I think they kind of mean, not having laws. You could then somebody in your family, you could hire somebody to kill them.
You still
If
can
they're
now.
mentally
Law
ill.
doesn't stop that. Law doesn't prevent that at all. There's contract killers all over the damn place. And there's mentally ill people everywhere. People are getting murdered and shootings happen all the time, and we have laws.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, so we can say, is murder wrong? I think it's wrong. Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll start there. Mm-hmm. And in societies where you don't have the federalized system, how do you deal with somebody turns into a murderer? That's that's a good question. Go ahead.
I think you would have to look at things from a corporate standpoint. And I know that the word corporation is a big buzzword and people don't like it. And to an extent, that's fair, because what they have become is a complete bastard of what they're supposed to be. But if you looked at things from a corporate viewpoint, it's no different than some of the places in the United States right now that are already unincorporated and they have private security forces that do their law enforcement for them. Everything is one of the things I say on Spags Unfiltered is that every decision is an economic decision. And until you view everything as an economic decision, you probably aren't going to quite grasp what I'm trying to convey here. And by economics, I don't mean money. I mean, we deal in all forms of currency, whether it's our time, our emotion, our energy, all of those are forms of commodity that we trade with each other with in some way. And so if you look at things from the perspective of everything as an economic decision, you will start to figure out how you can use that mindset to overcome things like a lack of central law. You don't have to have a central law that says you can't kill in order for murder to somehow magically become okay. I mean, look at the Old Testament. Look at churches. And I'm not preaching a certain religion or church here. Look at churches. Churches are decentralized organizations that have existed for thousands of years. They have governance, they have rules, they have membership, they have a system of revenue called tithes and offerings. They set up charity. They have all of these things, and they do so without pointing a gun to your head and saying, if you don't comply, we're going to come for you. And I think that society would work very similar to that. And there would probably be a lot more nuance. The larger the society, the more robust that would become. And some would argue that that's just creating a privatized government. But the truth is, that's what it would be at the end of the day. You still have to have governance. You still have to have hierarchy. You still have to have structure by which society arranges itself. We know that just from science, evolution, and even faith. All of those three things point to hierarchies and to governance. The only thing an anarchist would say is you don't get to pick one guy to be in charge of all of it, and you don't get to claim a monopoly on the right to use force.
Right. And I think that is where, when people start hearing, when somebody asks a question like we just got asked,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a Stantine 85. To me, that is an opening.
Mm-hmm.
That means, okay, you've got my attention, but I'm thinking of this scenario that won't work in what you're describing.
Sure.
And when I look at anarchy, which to me is, foundationally the non-aggression principle, nobody has the right to aggress on somebody else. When you
Correct.
talk about murder, that is aggressing on
Yes.
somebody else.
Yes.
And then it is our duty to help
react to
in
it.
that situation, right? That aside, that question's a really good one, because how would it work? Because the reality in which we live right now is murder is officially declared illegal by the government, and there's a whole system in place to go try to find the murderer, right?
Sure.
Well, never mind that they throw how many innocent people in jail just because they need higher numbers to get reelected. We'll put that aside. What's happening now isn't working that great.
Correct.
Can it work better through a society that has evolved towards an anarchistic approach? I think it can. Do I know the answer to every question of how we would solve every problem? No. And we haven't solved every problem right now. These problems are not solved right now. And so when those questions are happening, I think it's important to take them seriously.
Yes.
Not denigrate somebody asking the question, because it's a valid question, right?
It is a valid question.
People say, how would we pay for the roads? Good question. How would we pay for the roads? How can we pay for the roads? How
the same
can
way
we
do now without the middleman, which makes it more efficient, right? I mean, government actually doesn't build your roads. They still hire private contractors to do all that work. It's not a crew of government employees out there making your road. It's a private company. They steal your money, the government does, and then goes out and contracts the same people that you would, right?
Yeah.
We're already building private roads in this country. People just don't think about it. They're called parking lots. Every time Walmart comes in somewhere and puts in a vast parking lot, that's a road. And it generally connects to other parking lots with pass-throughs.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they paint lines on it, guys. They paint lines on it.
Yeah. And guess what? It's not like
they put speed limit signs on them.
They do. And it's not like there's
and
just
we ignore them all.
Deaths, right? And I think a very good point to make to the folks who ask these questions is, look, anarchism does not claim to be utopia. We are not claiming that anarchy is going to solve all your problems. But consider this, the 20th century alone, okay, and these numbers come from the United Nations, which is a pro-government entity, by the way, so consider that before you just dismiss this number. 98% of all death, rape, and theft in the 20th century is called democide, done at the hands of government.
Yeah.
I don't care what bad scenario you bring up to disprove anarchy. You can bring up regional warlords, you can bring up drug czars, you can bring up whatever you want that you think is going to become powerful enough in the vacuum without government, but none of them are going to come close to 98% numbers. No warlord can tax 320 million Americans to create aircraft carriers and nuclear weapons. Yes. So while removing the government doesn't solve all of society's problems, what it does is it removes the largest of society's problems and allows us more freedom to then deal with the problems that still remain or that would even arise in the absence of government.
Yeah. And I think in order for society to evolve for the better, we have to talk about these things. Mm-hmm. We have to talk about what could be, because so many people see how it is and use the parameters of how it is to try find solutions to the problems.
Yes.
When the problem is how it is.
Right.
And that doesn't mean like we should go tar, feather, and hang everybody who was ever involved in making things how it is, right? The move from, kings being important to how the United States is structured was a huge change in the world, had a huge impact all across the globe. And it was a step. It just didn't go all the way, right?
Right. It's the same with other things too. Slavery. There was once upon a time, nobody could envision a world without slaves. In fact, every society in the history of the world was built in some facet on the backs of slavery and exploitation, because societies from the Bronze Age up had, again, more people than resources. So you had to battle out for that. We all had child labor. We all had denigration of different people at different times, being forced to do things they didn't want to do for every society that has ever existed. That's the baseline. And people have to realize that. That's the baseline. Poverty is the baseline. Being naked is the baseline. Being enslaved and indentured is the baseline of the human condition. Anything past that's an improvement. So we have to be willing to look for the improvements past the baseline, and then we won't be so, I don't know, privileged and spoiled as to not realize how much better it could be without the safeguards we currently have.
You know, we have it really good too. And that's something else I think people forget. Mm-hmm. So somebody talked to me the other day and they said this, and I haven't like really looked at exactly how Rockefeller lived. Middle-class American lives better than Rockefeller did, mm-hmm. with a whole lot less money than Rockefeller had. Mm-hmm. And that is because of progress and technology. And like, if I think about, I'm like in the middle of a major remodel of my house. That's a big, some people would think it's a big bummer. I'm actually super excited to get it done and finally have a house that's better. But even without that, my house had electricity, running water, a roof that didn't leak, fairly easy to keep warm with a wood stove, like well insulated. Mm-hmm. And people live in huts made out of straw.
Right.
People live in cardboard boxes in the world, right?
It is very easy.
I have it really good here.
Yeah. How we got to where we are sitting from our ivory tower.
Yeah. And, and I look at real estate all the time, houses for sale that people who are younger than I am somehow managed to own. I'm like, wow, that's a really nice house compared to mine. Because I'm 1,200 square feet. It's relatively small, whatever. But I mean, it's amazing that we have that in our society. 25-year-olds are buying these like giant 4-bedroom homes.
Right. We live in probably the most privileged time ever. There's never been a time, not just a 21-year-old owning a home, but a 21-year-old woman owning a home.
Yeah.
Or people of different ethnic backgrounds owning a home in the same city, even, right? This is new. This is not what humans were used to for 10,000 years. And I think we need to be a little more thankful.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's talk about prepping and community. Somebody asked about the SelfReliance Festival in the comments. Spags is going to be at the SelfReliance Festival. He's helping me MC the event, which is great, which means I'll have more time to talk to y'all because I won't be on stage the whole time. And that's good. I wanted to build more time just to talk to the people who come. And Spags was kind enough to agree to help me out with that. And he will be at the booth for EMP Shield. So they're going to be on site. It's March 25th and 26th in Camden, Tennessee. Tickets are at selfreliancefestival.com. If you want to grab your ticket to get there in person, that's the best thing you can do. You will meet people unlike other people you've met, and a lot of them all in one place. If you can't make it, we have digital passes too. That's all over at selfreliancefestival.com. And of course, 30-day reviews is here, putting the helpful links in the comments as he does. Thank you, Justin. Anyway, preparedness. You came to sort of the homesteading from the preparedness angle. Why did you become a prepper?
I don't know that there was any one thing that drove me to it. I started prepping almost immediately after I moved out of my house. And I think probably it was my very religious upbringing. I grew up in a very, very Baptist home, and there was a lot of end of the world type stuff discussed. And so I think that a little of that was on my mind to begin with. And even though I didn't quite go down the same path in faith that my parents had, I think that definitely influenced me. And so when I turned 18 and I moved out, also in that same time period, shortly thereafter, I was also working in the security realm. You just see things like you go to other countries and you see things and you realize how shitty it could get. Just like that quick. Like the veneer of nicety is so thin in the West. It would take nothing for that to be taken away. And
we have seen this. Like, we have witnessed it.
Yes.
We have witnessed rioting for very little.
We have seen a very little bit of it.
Yeah.
But at 19, I had been already to several countries outside of the United States for various reasons. And so I saw what it was like other places, and I'm like, well, I should probably always have a little of this on hand, a little of that on hand, which quickly developed into just, I don't know, becoming a hoarder and hoarding as much of it as I could, because you never knew when the supply would run out. And then over time that progressed, and then I joined the army, and it became a little more militant, and the militant prepping side really kicked in, and I was going to build a prepper army, and we were going to survive the apocalypse, slaughtering zombies, all tacked out with all of our stuff. And then, you get a little older and you realize that's just prepper porn and it's never going to happen.
You're like, the zombies still aren't here and I'm 50. Dang it.
I know, right? Like, worst 2020, worst apocalypse ever. What the hell, man? But you go through so many of those failed apocalypses. Y2K, I lived through that. I lived through, 9/11. I lived through the war on terror. I participated in that stupid war on terror. I lived through 2020. I lived through the greatest president ever and the worst president ever. I've lived through all of it. And you realize at some point you're not doing this for an event. You're doing this as a lifestyle, because while none of the apocalypses actually occurred, man, that one time where I was really low on money, I had food in my basement and I didn't have, to borrow money for food. And man, it was really cool having 15, 5-gallon quart jugs of oil in my garage, because when the shortage was happening, I could still do an oil change and I didn't have to pay $200 to do it. And you realize that prepping is nothing more than an ancillary ability to fund your own life so that you never have to go into debt, essentially.
Yeah. I actually analyze things that I store as savings accounts. And somebody was really confused once when I called it my food savings account is my pantry. They thought I meant an actual savings account with money for food.
No.
And they're like, how is that different than just having a savings account? I'm like, no, the jars of food are my savings account.
Right.
Up on the wall over there.
It's an insurance policy. If you think about it, you're willing to spend money for medical, car, and homeowners insurance. Why not life insurance? That's, not death insurance.
Right. And if you build it in such a way that you're using it on a cycle.
Yes.
It's not really like I'm spending a bunch of money and throwing this away every 10 years because it went bad. That's a bad way to store things. What's better is cycle through them based on what you will probably need. And then sometimes you do store some things that you don't know if you'll ever need it, that do go bad, and that is what it is.
Sure. And I think that's the most important part. I think that's where when the prepper movement became really big in 2008, 2009, I think that's where a lot of people fell flat, and why a lot of people ended up getting what I call prepper burnout or prepper fatigue.
Yeah.
They were so used to just stacking shit from the floor to the ceiling and then never doing anything with it, that at some point as life happened, they realized they needed that room for something else. And they're like, well, I haven't had to use it yet. I guess I'll just sell it on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. Yeah. And then they're like, prepping is stupid. And it's just because they did it wrong.
Yeah. And I even my clothes cycle through on a cycle now. Like, I just had to build my jeans savings account back up,
there you go,
etc. Or like when I find a shoe I like, shoes will last for a few years in storage. If you try to store them for a long time, the rubber starts breaking down if they have rubber in it, and most shoes do. So I'll get a couple of pair. Like, I just got 2 sets of Birkenstocks because it was time, and they'll wear out and I'll have to cycle through again.
Yep.
And it's just really a mentality. And I think about the Boy Scouts when I go into prepping, like, be prepared for anything, and you have your pocket knife and all that stuff. Taking that mentality into your life is a great way to have stability.
Yes.
And then if something goes wrong, you're not like, how am I feeding myself today? You're like, okay, how can I deal with other problems? Whether that be, do I need to run next door and put the generator on my neighbor's fridge because the power's been, and we don't want her food to go bad? Or are we dealing with a bunch of trees down? Or is somebody really sick?
Right.
It could be lots of different things.
Sure. And a lot of the problems you were, alluding to earlier with how society would restructure in the absence of a central government kind of melt away when you become a prepper. And when you do it correctly, because all of a sudden now you have enough for yourself, but should your neighbor need something, you have something for them. And when you spend all of your free time, or at least a good chunk of it, on your property, on gardening, on animal husbandry, on this and that, you start to realize where the gaps in your plans are, and you might notice your neighbor can fill that gap. And so you're going to become better neighbors with your neighbor, and you're going to offer them what they need to fill their gaps. in exchange for what they need. And that's how you actually build the community, right? Community isn't just having a mailbox on the street in line with somebody else. It means you're actually interacting with these people and you're becoming intimate with them in ways where levels of trust and friendship and all of that start to build. And if you have a cul-de-sac full of people living that lifestyle and they start to become interdependent on each other a little bit, and everyone starts to specialize, guess what? You have a government-free society right there.
Yeah, you already have it, and it's already working.
It's already working.
Yeah. So talk to me about the Midwest Preparedness Project. Speaking of community, so you guys have built a pretty cool community where you are.
Yeah. You saw earlier in the comments, the channel Getting Deep with Data. He and I work on the Midwest Preparedness Project together with some other folks, and we all work together. And it's been around before me. It's been around for a long time. I'd say about 10 years, maybe 12 years now. They've had it. Prior to that, I ran what was called the Kansas Prepper Expo, which then turned into Full Spectrum Preparedness LLC. But in the last year and a half, 2 years, Data and I have been working together on Midwest Preparedness. And basically, it started out as a camp out based event where people went to this campground and they all hung out and they played, conflicted around the campfire, and they had a potluck and they did all these little social and communal things. And now we've grown it to the point where it's a much larger event. I think we're going to crest 200 people this year at that small little campground, which is going to become problematic. But we bring in classes, we bring in some local leaders, folks like Tag from Life Done Free,
Yep.
and Getting Deep with Data, and folks like that to come in and give presentations and speeches, and we give away prizes. And this year we're going to have a full lineup of 6 classes over 2 days. We have an event called Bartertown, which falls in line with our conversation, at 7:00 on Saturdays. Basically, there's this big covered pavilion, and we hang these cage lights under there and run it on a small generator, and it's really awesome. It's cozy. It's very, very familial. But everyone throws their stuff out on these tables, and everyone walks around and starts, I want that. Well, let me come over to my table and see what I have. And these people just barter back and forth. And for a couple of hours, the only rule is no fiat currency. You can't buy anything. It has to be bartered and traded. Now, what that means is up to 2 consenting adults. If you want silver, if you want eggs, if you want a tomato plant, whatever. And we also have a potluck on Saturday. On Friday nights, Data leads. I don't know if you all have heard of the card game called Conflicted. I actually know the guys who created that card game from my days in the expo. But it's basically a scenario-based card game where someone reads a scenario and everyone around the fire gets around and answers the question, how would you deal with scenario X, Y, and Z? And Data leads that masterfully on Friday nights. But the camping starts on Wednesday and it goes through Sunday. On Sunday mornings, we have a short little worship service for those who are interested. And then we clean up and go home. And we do it twice a year. This year is going to be April 26th through 30th out at Perry Lake in Northeast Kansas. It's a little northeast of Topeka. There's the website right there. That's our schedule of events. The only differences we're going to have to change is the second class on Friday. Chief is actually a battalion fire chief, and he fights fires out in the New Mexico, Arizona, California area quite often. And so there's a good chance he won't be able to be there, but we're bringing in a very exciting other speaker who's going to talk about CBRN, chemical, biological, nuclear, radiological stuff, gas masks, pro masks, how they work. There's a lot of interest in that after the Ohio train derailment. So we're going to have someone speak specifically to that topic. And you can see all the other stuff. And then, we have a bunch of sponsors that I go out. I spend 6 months of the year per show drumming up sponsors and prizes. And that's pretty much where my gifts lie. And Data organizes the grounds. He secures all of the nuts and bolts that we need to put the thing together. And him and I are probably on the phone every bit as much for that as we are for our actual jobs. It's become a full-time job on the side.
Yeah. Well, that sounds really fun. I'm planning to come to your fall one.
That'd be awesome.
Yep. And I already have those dates on my calendar because you gave them to me, but we won't confuse people with that. Guys, if you are in the Kansas area or not and want to go to the Kansas area, check that out. It's MidwestPreparednessProject.com. And the cool thing about it is it's just an organically grown community. And it's really cool to have community develop like that. It's sort of one person at a time, over time, word of mouth, and eventually it just turns into a big group. And one of the things that like we're really focused on at SelfReliance Festival, this event, is the lone wolf does not survive.
Correct.
The lone wolf may temporarily do okay, but they don't survive long term.
Correct. And we start all the way down young too. There is going to be, and that's just the adult schedule. What you see, we have still not put out all the information because I like to trickle it out and keep people interested, right? But we have an entire lineup of children's events on those days as well. We have a children's event coordinator. Her name is Christy, and she handles putting on kids classes and making sure they don't conflict with the adult classes and overlapping them. And she does a real masterful job there too. So all these, so we start young. We start this concept with the children and we grow it up because it's just a bunch of old middle-aged fat white guys from the Midwest sitting around talking about preparedness, and you don't do anything with your kids, that you're not really securing anything. So you kind of have to start that on fertile ground in their minds.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, what have you learned? What are the most important things that you've learned about keeping the community healthy as part of the Midwest Preparedness Project?
I think probably the biggest life lesson in any community building event, be it this one or others, is learning how to check your ego at the door. Especially for us guys, ego is a very present part of who we are as men. And I very much speak to that on my channel from time to time, the whole concept of men being men again. And you have to, as a man, learn to tap into the ego and use that as a tool. But the problem is that most men don't know when to rein it back. I'd put myself squarely in that camp. There are times I don't know when to shut the hell up either,
Mm-hmm.
But when you have a community of diverse people with different backgrounds, different belief structures, even if you're all very common, there's always going to be some difference.
Yeah.
And learning how not to let those differences dictate the path forward is probably the biggest lesson that one would have to learn, that I've certainly learned, and learning how to keep that ego in check when needed.
Yeah. I know for me, it's been having standards of how we interact with each other in the community,
mm-hmm.
where it in my communities, it's not really acceptable to browbeat somebody.
Sure.
Even if they're doing something wrong, piling on somebody is bad behavior.
Yes.
And so we had to, we still look for ways to do this, resolving conflict in a way that makes sense for the community. Sometimes it's just don't get involved because it's a conflict between two people who need to figure it out.
Right. Sometimes
somebody's doing something that hurts the community, and the ultimate result there is you're no longer in the community. But we don't have a big exit ceremony for you.
Yeah.
You're just no longer in the community. It's done.
Right.
And I have found cutting out the cancer quickly has been super important as we've been growing.
Yes, that is probably the hardest thing, because that is the underlying foundation to where government starts.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've had to deal with this once. How can we prevent it from happening again? And now we have rules, and now we have laws. Now we need someone to adjudicate those laws, and now we need someone to enforce those laws. And that's when the structure begins, right?
Yeah.
I think it's also important to do what you said and understand that everything is an individual incident, unless it's the same person doing the same pattern of events.
Yeah.
But even that's a segregated event, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the danger comes in when you try to look at things from generic points of view instead of specific points of view. And you have to learn to deal with that stuff individually and not try to make a one size fits all blanket that's going to prevent it in the future.
Right. Right. Well, because you can't. And I mean, I some of the standards we have is any religion can come to my event.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what race you are. You can come to the event. I don't care how you identify sexually. You can come to the event. If you are hurting somebody else at the event, that's a problem.
Yes.
And I don't associate your choice of religion with your hurting somebody.
Sure.
Or whatever. And, or choice of politics. This is one where people have really pushed back on me. We have liberals who come to our SelfReliance Festival event, and people get there and assume it's all conservatives. Well, it's mostly anarchists, guys. libertarians
Represent.
and anarchists. It's mostly that, but there are some conservatives, and there are fewer liberals. But there are liberals who are the kind of liberal who think the Second Amendment is there for a valid reason.
Mm-hmm.
And last time I was there, I started out saying there are liberals among us. And everybody's like, "Oh no," and they looked around, and it was because somebody I know who listens to my podcast is there, and she's very, very liberal. And I was like, "Sweet, you're coming, and you're gonna interact with people who may not agree with you on everything." And she said, "I just wanted to stand up and shout, 'We carry guns too!'"
I have very, very liberal friends who carry guns. I mean, look, the world's big enough for everybody. And in an anarchist style society, you can very well have a socialist commune living right next to a free market capitalist commune. And as long as you don't declare war on each other, you do you, boo. I'm not going to go live where you're at, but I can certainly trade with you. You know, I'm not going to get scabies from handing some beans to a socialist. I don't like socialism at all. I hate Bolshevikism as a philosophy, but I can certainly be friends with people who don't believe like I do.
Yeah, and we learn from each other when we start talking about the why. Sometimes they change, and sometimes you change. Dusty says, "Someone did that. Now we need a rule. That's why my parents' church now have a no barefoot on stage rule. At SRF, you can be barefoot on stage. Just it might be a bit cold this time, but yeah. So we don't have the barefoot rule there.
Yep.
What if I identify as a conservative liberal? That's fine, Data. You do you. You do you.
Yep. I totally agree with you on that too. I did a kind of it was meant to start out as a parody video recently. Conspiracy theorists. Oh my God. I love them. I am one, but Jesus.
Yeah.
I had these guys just going off on me on a social media thing about it's the Jews. And I'm like,
yes. That's been the thing this week.
Does it make any difference who the aggressor is, or does it make a difference what they're doing? What's more important here? There's plenty of bad guys and there's plenty of bad anarchists. I've met them. They're idiots.
Yes.
You know, I don't care if it's, a liberal or a Jew or a Gentile or a Baptist. If you're wronging me, you're wronging me, and your adjective makes no damn difference.
Right. And that's it's so funny that you bring that up, because that's been all up in my face this week too. I don't know why. I don't know what caused it, because I do sort of look at current events, but I don't keep up on the currentest of current events because it does not impact my life.
It's probably the banking thing. It's probably the banking thing that's brought up the whole Jewish conspiracy theory,
Oh, I see. Yeah, the banking thing's a big deal.
And honestly, even if it is true, who gives a shit? You're not going to do anything about it except for bitch on social media. So how about you go grow a tomato and do something useful?
Exactly. It's funny because we talk about, Agenda 2030 and the World Economic Forum and all that stuff. That's the best. That is like, people are like, that's a conspiracy theory. I'm like, literally, if you go to their website and read what they want to do, they're like, this is our conspiracy. Check it out. I'm not sure that could be called a conspiracy theory. They're like right out in the open about it. But
you're not wrong.
Yeah. And people get really twisted up about that. That's the reaction they're going for.
Well, I think it also gives them an out. I think that's why so many, and I'm going to make some enemies here, but that's fine. Like I said, buyer beware, I am unfiltered. That's why so many 300-pound preppers love the Illuminati, because it gives them a reason to be a 300-pound prepper. When the enemy is so damn big, you can't do anything about it. It encourages inaction. And I think that's why the conspiracy realm is so popular within our circles. I don't mind a good conspiracy theory. I'll drink a beer and talk to you about it around the fire. But at the end of the day, we got work to do in the meantime.
Yeah, we do. And that's where the, somebody was like, well, who's behind the WF? And it's like Schwab, whatever his name is.
I told you, it's the Jews.
Klaus Schwab. No, he's a German, I think.
Yeah.
But so it's the Nazis, basically.
It's the Nazis.
It's the Nazis. And they're back.
It's all of them.
Yeah.
I just think people suck in general, and we're just a cursed species.
Like, they're like, but maybe somebody's behind him. I'm like, yeah, maybe. But does it matter who is pushing that agenda? And that's not really the agenda they're pushing all the way. They're saying this is our agenda. This is what we're pushing. They're pushing a step back from that. And they know if they crazy talk here, they normalize something that we would never have allowed a decade ago.
Sure.
Right? That's what they're really doing.
Incrementalism.
And I don't care who's behind it. I care that it's going on and that people are falling for it. That's really all that matters to me. And if I spend all my time trying to dig up who, then I don't spend my time doing something different.
When I don't have to get my eggs from Walmart, I really don't care what Tractor Supply is putting in their food. You know?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
I
that was
become
a whole
free
thing.
of that. You divorce all those, you know, those controls that people hold over you, and it doesn't matter.
Yep. So, you know, it's funny because that whole Tractor Supply thing came up,
Mhm.
and it turns out there is some evidence, some verifiable evidence that there was a problem with the feed.
Yes.
When it first came up, I didn't believe it because it was in the dead of winter when chickens don't lay eggs, and we have a whole
Right.
bunch of people with chickens for the first time, and I was like, "Okay, I'm not gonna say it's wrong, but I'm gonna say you better start asking some questions and have somebody verify it before you buy that narrative because it's December." And, my chickens also don't lay in December, you know? And but I didn't have a way to know because I don't feed my birds Tractor Supply food unless it's an
Mhm.
emergency.
Right.
So, you
And
know,
even there, I didn't use
apparently we're
their brand.
stereotyping Germans and Jews.
Oh, we are. We
Oh,
absolutely are.
totally,
We're using them in a
totally.
very general state just to illustrate a greater
Yeah,
point.
and it's not about judging based on either of
No,
those 2
stereotyping
definitions.
is used to portray just like it's a meme, right? It's portraying a deeper truth in as few words as possible. I don't
Yeah,
have 3 hours to sit here and discuss it to the minutia.
yeah, and yeah. Anyway, I almost moved to Germany. Did
Nicole,
you know that? How dare you?
how dare you?
Oh, good, we got it. We got it.
Greta has arrived.
Yeah. Anyway, I actually don't buy the narrative of those things,
Yeah.
but that is how
Waste of
people
time.
use those things and make those connections.
It's a waste of time. And so I am very much in the camp of the only way to get rid of it is to laugh it into non-existence. So you have to use it. You have to use it as a trope on itself. You have to use it as a way to make fun of itself in order, but the same way that certain elements within the far left have made it where we can't say certain things anymore because they've created a narrative around it. We have
Yeah.
to do that back. We have to absolutely arrest the narratives back by laughing at the evil and turning it into a trope, into a stereotype, into a meme, into a joke, because we remove their power that way. I'm not scared of any of these big, giant boogeymen because I laugh at them. They're funny. It's a joke.
Yeah. And
And
I
sure,
mean, it's
they could crush me anytime they want, and I know that. And because I know that, I don't care. Nothing I can
yeah.
do about it.
It's like I will be crushed if they choose to crush me. You know,
Sure.
it's funny. We've talked about racism a few times on my podcast, and I come from an a currently unpopular approach on it, where I do my best when I meet somebody to judge them based on how they interact with me,
Mm-hmm.
not on how long their hair is, not on if they kind of look like a dude in a dress, not on what color their skin is, or what religion I understand them to have, or whatever. Like when we do stuff, do you follow through with what you say you're going to do?
Yep.
And that is racist, by the way.
I guess.
It turns out I'm racist for not judging people based on whatever the latest popular groups are.
You know, I
And,
guess
and
we're
I'm
on
like,
board.
I like literally could get a job application with, no name and work experience and compare them and be totally happy evaluating the people based on that, except I do need to read somebody's body language before I hire them because that's way more important to me than their experience.
Sure.
And then the second thing that's important to me is after I hire you, do you work?
Right.
Because usually what I'm hiring for, I can teach you how to do it if you work and you can like replicate things over and over.
Right. Be useful no matter who you are, and
Yeah.
you'll be fine.
But now we have all of these like crazy hiring and admission processes that go through a calculation based on characteristics that have never mattered to me. And so I'm racist,
Yeah,
by the
apparently
way.
so.
I
Then
I'm
again,
also I don't know if you know this, I'm apparently a Satanist.
uh, I read an article recently that was making the claim that any white person that owned a dog was engaging in racist cultural appropriation because people from Africa domesticated dogs first. I'm like, okay, well, does that hold true for everything, like horses and chickens and pigs and whatever else? I mean, my gosh, we're really scraping the bottle of the collectivist barrel when we have to go to dog ownership as a sign of hatred and bigotry.
Yeah, I one of my favorite restaurants in Portland, Oregon, where I used to live, got put out of business in 2020. It might have been 2019. It's around then. Because it was a South American style restaurant where they made their own tortillas. And they had traveled in South America and learned to make the tortillas from natives. And they were white.
And
I
think I heard something about this.
People went off on them about appropriating the food. And here's what I thought. I was like, I'm somebody who's traveled to a lot of countries.
Mm-hmm.
And I am bilingual German speaker. And I've learned a lot about German culture and cultures of German-speaking countries by being there and just evaluating. Like, I did work on that professionally for a long time because I wanted to understand some things about Germans solve problems differently, in part because the language is structured differently, but also, hundreds of years of history has impacted how a German will approach something versus an American. So if you get them in the same room together, there's conflict.
Sure.
But if they're aware of the different in approach, they'll actually tap each other's strengths and come up with a better conclusion. So it's kind of a cool
thing. Lived in Germany for a few years.
Oh yeah, where?
Ramstein. My dad was Air Force. I lived by K-Town.
Yeah. Yep. So because of that, like, part of my entry into wanting to travel different places was Chinese food.
Oh, yes.
Now, Chinese food, when I was growing up, it was like this really weird, rare thing that you could get.
Right.
We tried for the first time and it was like, ooh, what's this? And it was delicious. And actual Chinese food in China, I'm sure, tastes different than this. But, it was our first entrance. And then Thai food came along. And then I tried Japanese food. And I was like, whoa, there's a whole nother culinary world out there. I
know. It's not just chicken nuggets and macaroni.
Yeah. And then so, having exposure to these different types of things is super cool. And it's how we get motivated to say, you know what, I am going to go to Japan and check out Japan. And Japan is a very different culture than ours. Mm-hmm. That was probably my biggest culture shock with that country. Way more culture shock than Thailand. But it was first the food that captured my interest. And then the anime, of course. And then, and all of that is totally like not, it's products of the culture. It's not the culture, right?
Right.
But I'm a way better person because I've been to all of these countries and seen different level, like I've seen what poverty really can look like.
Sure.
Compared to our poverty, in air quotes. Mm-hmm. Being poor in this country is not pleasant, but it's not like that.
No.
It's not like that.
And I hate to tell these people this, but every culture appropriates every other culture. There is no such thing as a completely sterile culture. It doesn't exist. Everybody borrows a little bit from everybody, and that should be more of a compliment than anything, Yeah.
I think it's the book called 1491. Have you heard about it?
I don't think so.
I think it's 1491 is the title of the book. Anyway, it's before 1492 on purpose. So it's all about native cultures in North America. Mm-hmm. What they were really like based on anthropological research. And it's completely different than what you and I learned in school.
Oh, sure.
And they talk a lot about, as Europeans were coming over, the intermixing of the cultures. Mm-hmm. And how Native American culture probably influenced our ability to come up with the freedom concepts upon which the country is based, from how tribal nations interacted with each other.
Right.
Super, like, it is well worth a read, guys, if you're looking for a book. And I'll actually look it up and make sure I have the right name, but I think it's 1491.
What's the closest? Is that North Dakota that you've had a meetup?
Where?
30-day reviews question.
Oh, what? Yes, North Dakota.
I was actually born in Minot, if that counts. I was born above the missile silos on the Air Force base there. But to North Dakota that I have had a meetup. I have been to South Dakota, probably the closest I've been over the last couple of decades. But Midwest Preparedness Project, we pull people from Texas, Carolina, Nebraska, Missouri, Colorado. So it probably would not be uncommon or unheard of that somebody from South Dakota would show up there.
Yeah. 30-day reviews, hop in your camper, get going.
I'll have to check that out. It's interesting you bring that up because there was a conglomerate of Indian nations up by the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
And they're one of the few examples of an actual libertarian anarchist society that lasted for hundreds of years.
Yeah, no, I think they talk about that in this book. I haven't finished.
Years.
Yeah.
No central governments, them and the Brehons, the Scots, the ancient Scots were another libertarian style, anarchist style, and they lasted over 1,000 years.
Yeah.
We're not going to last 300 probably.
And the lesson here, there's another lesson. And it's actually why I asked CJ Kilmer to come to SelfReliance Festival is every society eventually transitions to something else.
Yep.
It has been going on the whole of humanity. We don't just become the United States and the borders stay the same forever and everything stays the same forever. That's not how we work.
Sure. And it's not how anyone else works either.
Right. And so the fact that we have actually basically kept mostly the same borders for so long is kind of astounding.
It is. It's very odd.
Yeah.
And there's probably a million reasons for that we could delve into at any time.
Yeah, there are. And I'm less well prepared to talk about why, but it's really interesting when you think about it, because as an American, my perception is that's how the country works. Like,
right. That's how it's always been.
We've declared ourselves a country. We'll be a country. It's right here. We drew our artificial random lines.
Everyone
is what it is. You look at Europe over the last 100 years, you're like, wait a minute. They redrew their lines a couple times. So I bet the European perspective is a little bit different on the rise and fall of nations.
Sure. Most of them contracted. A lot of the big empires, the British, the French, even the Spaniards, their empires expanded well out. The Dutch expanded into Africa, the East Indies, all these places. But as time went on, they contracted. They lost their colonies as time went on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. So I love talking about this stuff, and we're coming in on an hour. We're actually over an hour. I'm sorry. The problem is if we get to talking, guys, we'll just keep talking. And so obviously this was all about building community, right?
Well, we covered it.
We talked about it. Somebody in here said, so let's talk about this one last thing, then we'll wrap up. You'll tell people how to go to your event and all that stuff.
Sure.
Somebody said, it's really hard to build community. What's your reaction or advice to somebody who feels that way right now?
They're absolutely correct. But that should be a very encouraging thing. That's a good thing. Nothing that is worth doing is easy. And the most reward you can possibly get, and this is not contestable. I mean, this is known by human behaviorists and psychologists. The greatest joy that a person can have is in completing something that is exceptionally difficult. It's why even when the world was at its youngest or semi-youngest or in the middle, when life was really hard, great men and women did great things. You would think that when life was harder and more poor, Alexander the Great wouldn't have conquered the whole damn world, but he did, because there's joy in combat. There is joy in achieving greatness, and greatness is very difficult to achieve. And it doesn't have to be Alexander the Great style greatness. It can be your own community that you've built. But in building something, you have a sense of ownership. You have a sense of pride. That part of our ego that needs to be stroked gets stroked. But the humility is also there because you realize you didn't do it yourself. So yeah, it's hard, but do it anyway. It's easy to watch Dancing with the Stars for a 15th season, but your life's also not going to be very happy.
In order to build community, you have to get out of your chair and go do it.
Yes.
And that can be the hardest for us, especially in today's modern society where it's so easy to sit behind a computer and talk to somebody, right?
Yep.
And if you don't go out and go to people, you never, somebody said you have to build trust. Yeah, you don't build the trust, because I don't build trust until I meet you. And I may try to, but eventually I just got to meet you.
Yep.
And I was watching a dude who said, you know very quickly if you like somebody or not.
Sure.
And it has nothing to do with the words they say.
Mm-mm.
Nothing to do with the words they say. And you cannot get that unless you're in person. And so it's scary to get out, but you got to get out. And I don't know why we have accepted in our society that it's scary to get out. I think, and I'm an introvert, guys. So I understand not, feeling that anxiety before going out and all of that. But part of that is reinforced by society.
Yes.
You need to feel scared to get out because they don't want us to develop community. The system does not want what we're doing to happen, but it can't stop it without doing some things that will completely destroy the trust that other people have in the system.
Yep.
And so that's our loophole, really, is we're lucky enough to live in a world where we can get off our butts and go to things like the Midwest Preparedness Project in April and go get to know people and develop trust and do Bartertown and all of that stuff. That sounds really cool. So,
and the SelfReliance Festival in March.
In March, yes, SelfReliance Festival in a week and a half. But tell us about your event, how people know more about you, and then we'll wrap up.
Sure. Go to MidwestPreparednessProject.com. You can find us on Freesteading. You can find me running the MeWe page. Patrick runs the Bookface page. And you can find us on all those outlets. And come see us. All the details are there. The location's there. The list of classes has been published. Over the next few weeks, we will be posting the prizes that we're going to be giving away. We'll be posting more detailed class descriptions, children's events, Bartertown stuff, all of it, all to come. So just find us on social media, follow the webpage, and come see us.
Yeah, that sounds like a really fun event. Can't wait to be to the one in the fall. Sorry, I'm missing it in April.
Yeah.
But,
it's so hard to pick dates. I don't
know.
like spring events, man. They're so weather dependent when they're outdoors. And
oh yeah, I'm sure we're getting rained on in a week and a half, but that's why we have the circus tent. So
yep. It'll be fun.
Cool. Thanks for being on the show.
Well, thanks for